Hi, everyone. Welcome to Transitions. I'm your host, Anne Wagner, and today I'm here with Nicole Marshall and Brittany Cober, who are both youth counselors with Addiction Outreach. Welcome.
Thanks.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to the two of you. I think it's a really unique thing you're doing, going into the schools. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about what each of you do? What your role is in the schools?
Okay, so I work in the Huntsville High School along with the Parry Sound High School and Almagwin High School. So what I do is I do a lot of one-on-one youth support regarding substances. So whether a student is struggling with substances, whether they've been suspended from school and need to meet with a substance use counselor, that kind of thing. So basically I just work with them in regards to why they're using, what's going on, is it for fun? We know kids like to try substances, so, we do that one-on-one support in the sense of just giving some education and giving them the support they need in regards to their substance use and what's going on.
Okay, yeah. Great.
Yeah, and I piggyback what Nick's doing in Bracebridge, Muskoka Lake Secondary School, and in St. Dominic's. We're getting going in there, and in Gravenhurst High School, so doing the one-on-one support for students that have either reached out themselves or been referred through admin at the school. And then on top of that, we have an elementary program that I am working and piloting and expanding, so providing one-on-one support for students in the elementary schools that if they have family members or if them themselves are starting to experiment, and then also providing classroom education and prevention stuff, so going into the classrooms and doing hour-long presentations to the classes about common substances or how to say no and all those sorts of things.
Okay. Well, that's pretty progressive that we have you coming into our elementary schools and actually acknowledging that people that age might be experimenting or using substances.
Yeah.
Was that a challenge to get into the elementary schools, or did they welcome you?
They're not pretty, they're very welcoming. I think it's the goal is the prevention, right? So the earlier we catch it, the better. So it's not trying to sell it, it's we need to do this sort of thing. So it's been amazing. A lot of the schools have been really welcoming.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And in terms of meeting with your secondary students, you had mentioned that they could self-refer to see you, or they could be recommended by school staff. Are there generally any concerns on their part about who's going to find out they're seeing you? About confidentiality?
Absolutely, and I think that goes adult or youth, and that concern of what my friends are going to think, what are teachers going to think. So there's definitely that concern. We make it pretty closed. We try. Yeah, we definitely try to keep it so it's very confidential for the kids. I know in Huntsville High we just call them down to guidance. We don't say why they're coming. It's strictly, they don't say, hey, Nick's here for addiction outreach counseling, you have to come see her now. They don't do that. They're more specific on just come to guidance, and then they realize that they're there to see whoever, me or Brit.
And we have the tools that if, especially when it's self-referrals, if they aren't comfortable with being pulled out of class or things like that, we can set up ways to meet, specific times so they know they just leave class at that time or over lunch hour or whenever. It doesn't have to be for everyone to know. It's just whatever's easiest and whatever is most comfortable for the student.
Great.
Yeah.
And so how do you find they react? Especially I'm thinking in the case of students who maybe haven't self-identified or sought you out on their own, but rather it's been suggested to them that they meet with you. How do you sort of handle that initial meeting?
In that sense, I just try to get to know them, it's not a push. I'm not there to give them trouble, and I'm not there as an authority figure like a parent or a teacher or principal or whatever, so I just try to have an open conversation with them so that they feel a little bit more comfortable, and I'm that neutral party for them to talk to.
Yeah, and we're a harm reduction agency, so that is meeting them where they're at. So if they come in and they're been referred because they got in trouble for smoking pot and they don't want to stop smoking pot, well, okay, but how do we reduce the harms? How do we make it so you're not getting suspended or you're not having to come see me, or so how do we make it so the harms that are obviously coming out in your life are not there anymore. And the whole idea is, I mean, without there's no hidden agenda, but at the same time, when we open the conversation up that way, then maybe down the line it's looking more critically at what we're using or why you're using it, right?
Yes. So it sounds like that's a great strategy, and it would be engaging to young people. They don't feel like, as you say, you're not the authority figure imposing your way of seeing the world. But I'm curious, it made me immediately think of parents and guardians and how they might be saying, what do you mean you're telling my kid that it's okay to use pot? Does that factor in? Or are parents maybe not even aware?
I mean, harm reduction is a tough sell. It is. Even when I first came into the field, it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean we're going to condone these things? We're going to say it's okay. But you have to look at it from the view of, if we're trying to start a conversation with a young person, if I immediately, or you need to stop doing this right now, their walls go up. They're not going to talk to me. Whereas if I start the conversation of, let's talk about what the harms are and how can we reduce the harms, there's room down the line to say, okay, maybe this substance isn't doing anything good for me. So it definitely, we get kickback from schools, from parents, whoever, even, you know, within the field. Sometimes you can have those, are we really doing the best we can? But we really are. You know, it's starting that conversation, and it's, you know, young people need to know that they're not going to be judged for what they're coming to see us, and that's the root of harm reduction.
And I think the other piece to look at that as well is us educating the parents, you know, and I think that's a big thing. Parents are concerned for their child, but, you know, they have a lot of questions themselves that need to be asked. So I think, you know, when we do parent nights, when we're there, you know, a lot of parents do have those questions of, what is harm reduction? What does that look like? You know, so at least then we can provide them with that. And for the most part, they're pretty understanding once they know what we're talking about. If their kid comes home from school and says, oh, well, they said I could smoke pot, just not at school, then, you know, a parent's back gets up. But once the parent understands what we're talking about or the strategy we're using, they tend to understand why we're saying what we're saying.
So just a curiosity, you're educating parents. Are they always aware that their children are seeing you, or is it a confidential service? How does that work? How do you negotiate those boundaries?
Yeah, we're a confidential surgery, so service. So it's definitely not. Parents don't always know. No. As for the elementary,
it's kind of at the discretion of the school. So depending on the age of the student, depending on the reasons why they're being referred to us, and the concerns of, you know, safety and things like that, it's a decision between the school and myself and the student on how we kind of have to proceed with those things. But most of the time, it still remains a confidential service for the student.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, we've used the example of pot, which, you know, it's not legal, but it's more broadly accepted, if I can say that, than it used to be. Do you ever encounter situations where young people are using harder drugs? Maybe there's imminent medical risk to their use. Do you ever confront those types of challenges?
I mean, we see harder drugs, absolutely. So whether it's cocaine, the hallucinogenics, the MDMA and things like that, we see those drugs all the time. And I mean, any drug, even marijuana, there's still those medical risks, and there's still those concerns of, you know, the safety and what it's being cut with, or what, you know, things like that. So, I mean, there's always safety concerns, but at the same time, we can only do so much, right? We can't put them in a bubble and hope that
right.
Not that we haven't thought about
we
it.
would like to. We would like to put them in a bubble, but so it's, you know, it's connecting and building trust and doing as much education as we can. And, you know, the youth also, they know a lot more than we know some days, or they know what's going on, or what's happening, or what's safe and what's not safe. So it's trusting them to take all the information in.
Okay.
Yeah. No, definitely the youth are educating us, you know, as much as, you know, Brit and I have gone to school and we know certain things. In their communities, in their schools, you know, there's a difference in every school we're in. There's similarities, but there's differences as well. So they know what's going on in their school, and they're going to be willing to educate us about that, and pretty openly, I think. Yeah.
And so then I imagine that then informs what you do with the the kids you're still working with and your future clients as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So you really are the front line.
Yes, we are.
Front line.
Well, we're just going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back with Brittany and Nicole in a moment. Hi, everyone. We're back, broadcasting today from Hunters Bay's satellite studio at Nipissing University. And we're talking with Nicole Marshall and Brittany Cober. And we're talking about providing addiction services specifically in the schools. And you've talked about some of the young people you meet with. I'm wondering whether sometimes the people that come to see you aren't only the people who are using themselves, or maybe they are, but the friends of people who are using, who maybe are concerned and want to reach out and get some information or support.
Yeah, absolutely. There's many times where, we'll do a presentation, or I know I have anyway, and a friend said, oh, that reminds me of somebody, they need some support. Where do I find you? Or, how do I get in contact with you? So there's definitely that concern. And, I find that friends they want to be able to help their friends, and they want to, their friends stream off a path, right? When we get too far into our addiction, we tend to lose things. We tend to lose friends. We tend to disconnect. So a lot of times those friends reach out and go, this is what my friend's going through. I need some support with that.
Yeah. And wondering how they can help, I think when we think of young people, we think the most important people to them are their friends, right? It's really a time where that peer circle is so important. And, well, as much as the lovely radio people can't see as young as Nick and I look, we're not that young, and we're not part of that circle, right? So if a friend feels they can step up and maybe even just help their friend get through the door to talk to Nick and I, then if we can help bridge that, or if we can help them understand that there's only so much they can do too, and that, as a friend, you can be a support, but you can't make someone change, and you can't make someone want to make different decisions. So definitely being that support is huge for us. Wonderful.
So you really are a resource to anyone who has concerns or questions about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we really, I think we push that we're not just for the person that's struggling with the substances in that moment, and when I think of the elementary stuff too, we look at kids that, is it a mom, a dad, an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a sister that's struggling with substance use, and you need that support to understand, even if you're 5 years old and something's not right, you might not know exactly what it is, but something's not right, and mom or dad aren't making the same decisions that they used to make. Having someone to talk to and having someone to process that with is really important.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So at the elementary level, it's often dealing with family issues, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time when it's that sort of support, it doesn't necessarily come through the school. It comes sort of outside through the office. So it's another parent or guardian asking for support for that young person. But yeah, absolutely, we do a lot. And I mean, I can't say for everyone, and I can't say, but a trend that we do see sometimes is, even when they're younger and in that elementary school age and experimenting, there's been some exposure to it at some point, whether it's a brother, sister, parent, whatever. It's common that there's that piece that needs to be supported too.
And do you see that at all at the secondary level? Do you see young people who come forward and they're not identifying as using substances themselves, but having concerns about a family member?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a big push for people getting support for their families. In regard, especially with our agency alone, we do do a lot more family support than we did when I originally started anyway. So it's definitely a big push now. And yeah, I have many people on my caseload that, they're coming because they're dealing with big stuff at home and they need that support and don't know how to deal with a family member being under the influence, or, worried about the family member's health, or, you're walking on eggshells sometimes, right? So they need to discuss that and need to work through that stuff.
It's a family issue, right? It's a family experience. And the thing with addiction is the person living it might not be ready to get the help and to get out of it. So you're a 15-year-old in this cycle and you want to get out of it, regardless of whether or not the addiction piece is going to go away. You need to have tools to be able to do that effectively, right?
So maybe could you tell us a little bit about some of the tools that you do try to share with young people? How do you support them and give them ideas about how to cope?
It's really about learning to advocate for yourself and learning that you have a voice and you have, the ability to make some big moves and some big choices, whether you're using the substances or whether you're in a family where you want to change the kind of cycle that you're existing in. So if it's talking about assertiveness and self-esteem, again, whether you're in a family system or you yourself are struggling with substance use, self-esteem is often a trend that a topic that we have to address and we have to look at. What are the motivators and what are the things that keep you from advocating for yourself or making healthy choices? Lots of stuff around, again, the assertiveness and using your voice and not being passive and not being aggressive, but not being that yelling, angry, screaming teenager, but just being the one that knows how to
say no when they need to.
Yeah, and use their voice and state how you're feeling. Those are big ones.
And developing a support system, How do I develop a support system? I don't know who's healthy, who's not healthy. So, working with them in the sense of developing a support system, whether it's having, a teacher on hand, a friend's family member, a counselor like Brit or I, or somebody, So it's also to support them in setting up that kind of circle of care, so to speak, so that they have somebody to fall on. We looked at, like Brit talked about, assertiveness, self-esteem, and being able to be passionate about things they like to do. A lot of the times when we're living in an addiction crisis situations, we tend to forget about ourselves in that. So looking at self-care, how do I look after myself? How do I live in this, I have to go home and babysit my brother and sister all the time because my, whatever's going on, my parents not available, whatever it is. How do I still have my life in that and my ownership and my well-being in that? So making sure that they're not dropping, I play basketball, I loved it, but now I don't play anymore. So how do I get back involved in that, right? So whether it's community groups or whatever. So it's a lot of advocating, really, like Brit said.
So it sounds like it's a very holistic approach.
Yeah.
So addictions are the primary reason they're coming in whatever form, but really you're providing them a host of supports and life skills well beyond that, it sounds like.
Yeah. I often joke with my clients. They'll say, "Oh, I know I'm not supposed to be talking about this," or "Oh, that's not about the drugs or whatever," but it is. It's all relevant. It's all part of your life. So, we touch on from A to Z, right? Depending on the day, depending on what's going on. Our goal is around the substance issues, but it's holistic, and we need to help people figure out what other pieces in their puzzle are missing that are going to make it easier to change the negatives.
And I found it really interesting when you said about building this network of support. So that could be professional, and it could also involve friends, family.
Absolutely. We try to work as closely as we can with the family members and with the community supports as well. Mental health, family, youth, and child, sexual assault services. I could go on, probation. So we all work together to help support that student, whatever it is that they need support with. So we'll tend to pull from wherever we can that's going to best support them. Yeah.
So you're able to help them build that network of support.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I realize I haven't asked yet, in terms of addictions, are we talking solely about substance abuse issues, or are we also looking at other forms of addiction? In a previous show, we had Charlene Cluett, who was talking just peripherally about addictions, and she mentioned issues of food addictions and gambling. Does that ever come up?
It can. I think with young people, when we see things like food addiction, so things around eating disorders and things like that, we're very mindful of where we have to bring in other supports. It's not that we're not able to address them, but something like that, there's lots of mental health concerns and other concerns that we don't want to jump into something not being able to support the person fully. So absolutely, the process addictions do come into play, and we do address them, but that would be a situation where we would definitely pull from other community partners and other team members to try and build that holistic team, because there's things in any addiction, whether it be a drug or a process, that there's other pieces of the puzzle that need to be looked at for sure.
We do have a lot of gambling too. We do a lot of gambling support. So whether it's gambling online, whether it's gambling in a buddy's house every Friday night playing poker, whatever it is kind of that's contributing to the gambling aspect, we definitely do support that.
And lots of education around that
Absolutely, a lot of education around that.
Well, I think one of the things I'm hearing is that you really are opening doors for people. You're working very cooperatively in the community, and you can also link people to further resources to broaden their network of support. Sounds like fabulous work you're doing. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So I'd like to thank you both for coming in today, and I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you.
Thanks
Absolutely.
for having us.
And if you have any questions or comments for us, you can reach us at transitions@hbr@gmail.com. That's transitionsathbr@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.